very happy for the second year in a row to have Father James Searby here with us as our guest speaker tonight. Father James has been a priest for 13 years in our diocese. He went to Bishop O'Connell High School and graduated from the University of Dallas, and then went on to St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Pennsylvania. He served in a variety of parishes in our diocese and now is on his third year as the chaplain at George Mason University at the St. Robert Bellarmine Chapel. How many of you, by a show of hands, have ever attended Mass at the St. Robert Bellarmine Chapel? Wow! That's great. Just also out of curiosity, how many of you have a senior here at Paul VI this year? Okay. How many have a junior? How many have a sophomore? Just leave your hand up, Cara. How many have a freshman? Great. Okay. So again, we are absolutely delighted to have Father James, a dynamic speaker, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good to be with you all tonight. So last time I was here, we tried to record the talk, and the recording didn't work. So tonight I got this one, and this one. So this talk will be recorded. It'll be on whatever means of communication you use at the school, and it'll also be on my podcast, which is Holiness for the Working Day, on both iTunes and Spotify. Holiness for the Working Day. It's great to be with you. Why don't we begin with a prayer, because that's the best way to begin everything. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Father, we place ourselves in your hands. We ask you to mold our hearts and our minds. Send your Holy Spirit upon us so that we may grow, so that we may change, so that we may know you, so that we may communicate you and that experience of your love to our children, to our family and friends, to those most in need of the truth. We ask our Blessed Mother and St. Joseph to be with us, to guide our families, and soon to be St. Paul VI, to intercede for us as our patron. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. How cool is that? He's going to be canonized. It's awesome. I'm very excited. We're going to have like a clean sweep soon. O'Connell, I don't think will ever be canonized as a saint. But we're doing, and Bishop Byron, I don't know, but at least we have two. We have two. No, we have two. John Paul and all this stuff. So we're doing good with the papacy. It's great to be with you. I always laugh at Catholics because we sit in the back, and I always know if I went to a Protestant school, everyone would be in the front. And you know why? There's actually a really good reason. I'll just give you a little bit of history. The reason that most Catholics sit in the back of the church, actually, we can thank or blame the Irish for that. It used to be that when it was illegal to practice the faith, and when they were kind of like in the in-between of illegal, like persecuted and not as persecuted, many of the people would sit, the Irish, especially the Hibernians, the ones who were used to protecting the priests, sat in the back of the church. And they would be there so they could be the first out and sometimes the first to protect if people came in to do damage to the church during a service. And so they got used to it, so when they came to the United States, many Irish would still sit in the back of the church as a habit. And many of us are of Irish descent, we inherited that from our ancestors, so there's a little bit of history for you. Tonight I've come to, now I had a question, Tom asked a bunch of questions of you. How many of you have a child going to college for the first time? In other words, have not had another college student? Okay, so of all of you, so you've had quite a few college students go ahead, yes? Okay. So tonight, I want to make this a dialogue. I want to make this an experience where we can talk. So you'll ask me questions, yes? Yes, you'll interact. So sometimes with younger people, when you deal with millennials and now in the post-millennial generation, the iGen, you ask a question and it's there's no facial recognition because you don't have to in front of a computer or a phone or whatever it might be. So I'm glad that we here, I'm assuming almost all of us are Gen X here. I don't really think there's any boomers here. So we're all Xers, which is good. So I'll try to make 80s references and stay rolling. Tonight what I'm going to talk about, really three things, and you tell me if there's something you want to know more about, okay? First, I'd like to talk about how to prepare a student for college. And really, we're going to take that into a moment of self-reflection. And then, how do you grow, how do they help them grow and keep their relationship with Jesus Christ? And I'm very specific though. I don't want to say how do they keep their faith, because we very often talk about the faith as this kind of innocuous, undefined thing. Our faith is first and foremost, primarily, an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. And everything else comes from that. So it's the primacy, a Christological center, the primacy of Christ. And then third, if we can get to it and you would like to hear it, what are some tips and techniques to be able to tour campuses and to be able to consider what colleges are like today? And I'd like to really talk about that first, because I think we need to explore just a little our experience and impressions and understanding of college. And I'm very blessed to be, George Mason University is the largest research university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are larger than Virginia Tech population-wise, and all the other schools. Interestingly enough, George Mason's the largest school at Mason now is our engineering school, and that's growing exponentially. Assumedly, by next year or the year after, we will have as much research funding as Virginia Tech. So we're in the engineering department, let alone in all the other biotechnical departments and stuff. So I'm blessed to be at a school that's not a liberal arts school. Even though there's liberal arts offered there, I went to a liberal arts college. And so it's great for me to be, the other day I sat down with one of the professors in the engineering school, and we talked about fluid dynamics. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I'm learning. Every day I'm learning something new. But university life and our whole impression of university has changed, both on the public and private level. So I want to just maybe give you a little background of why the university life is such an integrated part of American culture, more than any other country. I would dare you to try to go to any other country and see, do they have do they put on their bumper stickers what university they went to? Do people wear their university sweatshirts and their swag? Do they wear their university rings? A lot of our identity is wrapped up within the university ethos, if you will. And I think that's changing. I think you could make a good argument that that's changing a lot, and I'll explain. During World War II, most of the GIs that went over to the war started to find their identity and this kind of sense, that band of brothers sense from their unit. They defined themselves by who they fought with, where they fought, and things like that. They returned back from the war, and now the university system opened up to them. The GI Bill made it possible for them to go to college or to send their kids to college. And what happened is that people started moving out of the more urban neighborhoods, the neighborhood or your street, where you defined who you were by what neighborhood you were from, or what town you were from within a city. And so what happened is that more and more people moved from the cities into the suburbs. And especially in this area, that lifestyle started to boom. But what happened is people still wanted to have, we all want tribal identity. We want to have something to belong to that's going to define us, that's going to give some sense of impression. But we can say, oh, you too? Because really that's kind of at the core of a lot of friendship. So these men and women went off and they started to study in the universities, and they had this identity in their university. And of course you had the sports programs, and you had the growing academic programs, and because of the economic boom, you also started to have more endowments to the universities. So these universities became towns that allowed them to have a corporate tribal identity. They would then start to share that with their kids, the boomer generation. And so kids started, they would go off, and you had to go to college. It was this idea that this is the land of possibility and opportunity. If you go to college, you're guaranteed a good job, people would say. And I would say for the most part, especially for us who are of Gen X, I would say that most of us probably were graduating college in the 80s and 90s during some economically booming times. I know for me, I graduated college in 1995, and it was the dot-com boom. I pretty much got out of college, I could throw my resume up in the air and get a job like that. I had 5 jobs before I even thought about entering the seminary, because it was so easy and so much money was to be had. But, so what happens is that people start to develop this corporate identity based on the university they went to. And as I said, you start to wear the things and the swag. And now there's legacy. So children, you want your children to go to the university you went to so you can share something in common. Once again, economically speaking, people were saying, go to college, you're going to get this amazing job. And so our preparedness, there's like a formula to get into college, just like there was a formula to get a job. It was very much like a legal profession. If someone's going to be an attorney, they simply know that you go to this school, you get involved in this thing. By the second year, you're going to get your internships or your what do you do? Your clerkships and things like that. And then as soon as you get, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get into a firm and you're going to ride that out until you're made a partner and so on and so forth. It was the same thing with the college experience for the most part. People would go off to college, they'd major in usually either what their parents majored in because they liked it, or something that was very interesting to them. Colleges were also affordable for us. And now we've entered into a period of time where universities are different. You're no longer guaranteed a job with an undergraduate degree, or any degree for that matter. The traditional jobs have now changed. It used to be that like law school, med school, those kinds of like advanced schools after, a lot of people went to. I'll be honest, I rarely meet a student who tells me that they're pre-med today. Most people are not going into the medical profession. I'm sure there's a lot of like political and socioeconomic reasons for that. I'm not qualified to talk about that. But if you see, there's like kind of those traditional paths have abruptly stopped. And along with that, along with the rise of the startup and things like that, you actually don't even need the college education anymore to get those jobs. And in some ways, college education actually holds you back from being able to have a professional advancement. For instance, if you study IT in some places, you could go and you can get your IT degree, but while you're doing that, studying kind of the traditional path of IT, you have people who are actually in the job market creating new product, creating new coding, creating new software, they're making $150,000 a year as a 19-year-old who are coding games and they didn't need to go to college. So now students are starting to ask, what's the point? Like, why am I supposed to go to college? Well, we find ourselves in a very interesting situation because we, the older generation, still have the paradigms of the past firmly enrooted in our mind. And they don't have those paradigms. So you're starting to see there's a tension. They're wondering, why should I go to college? Now there's a big reason why a lot of people want to go to college. They want to have the college experience, and we hear about that a lot. But the college experience isn't what it used to be. It used to be that you'd have the college, there was different kinds. You'd have the college experience of meeting the bestest friends of your life. The thing is that people don't really know how to make friendship anymore because of, I'd say, probably because of technology. It's one of the biggest reasons. If you walk around George Mason, I get depressed sometimes because I walk around the university and people are just, they have their earphones in and they're buried in their phone. And they're completely divorced from social interaction. I'd say you probably experienced that in other places. You just walk through any mall or anything like that and you see high school students the same way. And so that socializing, they actually don't know how to socialize very well unless it's handed to them because everything is handed to them. Then what happens is you say, well, the college experience, a lot of people think the parties and stuff like that. The party experience that you and I might have had in college actually has changed quite a bit as well. They just don't happen as much. Because in order to go out and have those kinds of parties, you have to have some sort of, there have to be some sort of like sense of abandon. Like, I'm just going to go to a party, I'm going to drink, woo, it's going to be awesome. But if you're afraid to make mistakes, or if you're afraid to take risks, then you're not even going to go do risky behavior. So the whole party scene is kind of, it's not as exciting as it used to be to people. Which, that's good news. I would say that's probably good news. And what happens is that the job situation as well, our universities are not always forming our students to have a professional career. They're forming them in particular skills that may be employable, but not necessarily always forming them in innovation, self-control, and the things that are necessary. So what happens is students often get to college today, and they got there maybe because their parents helped them a lot. I mean, like, we all know that people help their kids fill out their college resumes and all those different things. Some of them may be like really driven to go. But quite frankly, a lot of them, I'd say the majority of students, kind of just throw out their resume as best they can, hope they get in somewhere. they get excited about where they go, and then they end up going. So what I want to do tonight is maybe talk to us about how can we form our students to be excited about this possibility, and also to discern whether or not they actually should go to college, or should go to college right away. Now that's a very difficult thing for us, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong. But I think in a lot of ways, we measure our success based upon if our kid goes to higher education. That's the socioeconomic condition we're in Northern Virginia. It's the academic condition we're in Northern Virginia. It's how our schools are often judged and things like that. But I think it's very important for us to ask, are they ready at 18 years old? Is my individual particular student capable of going off and really getting the most out of the college experience? Or should they take what's becoming more and more popular, a gap year, or even a gap 2 years? I know one thing I'm very excited about. George Mason has recently partnered with Northern Virginia Community College to have a through program where people can go to NOVA for the first 2 years, and if they intend to go to George Mason, they can actually get the same counselor all 4 years. They can make sure, the person will make sure that all of their credits transfer and things like that. And I actually see at my campus ministry, quite a few NOVA students come to our campus ministry, and the first 2 years of college are way less stressful for them because they have room to fail. So I'm going to talk a little about that. And so I think the first thing we have to ask is, what's the motivation for college? I acted when I was younger. I love acting. I think one of the important questions that an actor asks when they're entering into a role is, what's my motivation in this scene? They have to know, like, what motivates my character in this scene? What's the inner driving motivator? And they have to hash that out. I think for us too, we have to hash that out. What's my motivation in raising my kids and helping my kids? So it's a good examination of conscience. And also, what's motivating them? What's giving them a sense of purpose, a sense of drive, a sense of adventure, a sense of excitement, that joie de vivre, the joy of living. Because very often what happens is people graduate high school and just the culture that we're in squashes that joie de vivre, and they resign themselves to going off to college. Very often because it just means I'm going to have more freedom to do what I want. And then what happens is within the first semester, it's either sink or swim. And if they sink, it really discourages them for the rest of their life, ultimately. If they swim, if they really do well, then they're gonna like just skyrocket. They're gonna do great, usually. So the question I have to ask is, like, is my kid motivated to be able, and how can I motivate them to be able to go and do that? And I think the first thing to ask in our motivation is, how do you define success? This is a good question just to ask for a minute, to take it, maybe make a note. How do you define success? Because we all talk about success, we gotta succeed in school, we gotta succeed in life. But very often what happens is we don't define what success means, not specifically. And in doing that, our young people, they want to achieve this thing called success, but they don't know what it looks like. They don't know how to, they don't know what goal, what's the goal? What's the one thing I have to do to get there? So I want you to ask, like, do you consider success academic? And if so, what is success? Is it grades? Or is it knowledge? Or is it information that I've received? Those are very different things. I can be informed. I can make that into knowledge. That knowledge can then become actualized, which becomes then wisdom. Or I can consider it grades. And I'm sure we all know this, and maybe we were in different boats, but there's quite a few people who get straight A's that are not very bright. Right? And there's plenty of people who get like C's and D's who are brilliant. They just haven't tapped into the element of brilliance. That I was not the best student because I'm highly creative. But nobody ever tapped into my creativity, so I wasn't able to achieve the GPA until I went to the seminary, and then I figured that out. I got very good grades because I knew what they were looking for. But perhaps we ask that question. Do we consider faith success? Like, my kid is striving to be a saint. That's awesome. Do we consider professional career or a salary or marriage to be success? I think we need to ask ourselves that, because wherever we're starting, that's not a bad thing. Like, don't judge how you experience success, but it's good to know it, to define it, to place it there. I would venture to say that, to me at least, success is the formation of the whole person in freedom, so that they can be truly free. And it's the formation of the whole person. I say, what does it mean to form a person? Well, both in human virtue and human skills. Right? Like, they're able to get along in the world. I'm amazed at how many students come to me. It's like, how do you open a bank account? They ask me. I love it. I was like teaching this guy how to tie a tie the other day. I haven't tied a tie in 14 years. And so like I haven't had to wear one. So, and I'm like, I give it to me. And I like tied it, slipped it over my head and handed it to him. I'm like, all right, let's do that again. But now you're gonna do it. So I got another tie. And I'm like, he's standing next to me. I'm like, are you gonna cross? And then cross again. I'm doing the whole thing. And I'm like, wow, this is just human formation. These are basic skills for living. Do we have that human formation, human virtue? So it's, are they courageous? Do they have fortitude? Do they have temperance and perseverance and justice? I'd also say then academic formation, but more intellectual. So academics is an aspect of the intellectual life, but do they have intellectual curiosity? Are they focusing and specializing on that thing they're good at, and are they also developing a broader and wider understanding intellectually of the world? Obviously, spiritual formation, that third area, like really like being able to hone the spiritual life. It's amazing how often people will stop, and I know at Paul VI that wouldn't be the case, but like often people stop their spiritual formation at their confirmation retreat. They receive confirmation and then it stops there. But spiritual formation has to be for their whole life, to be able to grow, so that we can grow not only in our prayer life, but also in that understanding of God, an understanding of the church, an understanding of the depth of that truth. And then, of course, finally, fourth, apostolic. To have like an apostolic formation so that their life is about gift. Their life is all gift. That I have this formation has taken place so that I may be of service to my family, my community, my church, my world. I would consider that to be success, at least in my estimation. Or maybe you correct me if you have other thoughts. So how do we? Sorry if I keep coughing. I'm just getting over pneumonia. So, how do we prepare? I'm going to be a little provocative here. Okay, I like to do this and talk. So you come back at me, will you? Will you say something to me if so? Okay. Okay. How can we prepare them for college? Let them fail. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. You know, we used to say to like talk about helicopter parents, right? And I don't think there's any helicopter parents here, right? Because you probably wouldn't come. You would be just you'd already know everything. But helicopter parents are ones that like kind of thank you. They're always like hovering, right? Watching their kids, making sure that everything's good for them. Now we've entered into the Zamboni parenting, right? So it's not hovering over them now. It's like just I'm going to go. Zamboni is that machine that smooths out the ice before a hockey game or during the hockey. So it's this idea like I'm going to smooth everything out so that every choice, decision, action, and possibility is just smooth so that they can have a great life. But in actuality, it's only in failure that we learn how to live. If you read some of the memoirs of whether it's the great CEOs, the great leaders, great military leaders, the great creatives of the day, and it's so wonderful that we have so many opportunities, so many people keep memoirs and we've learned about this. They all say to the man and woman, it was my failures that taught me more than my successes. And what happens is that we don't allow kids to fail. And fail within like a, obviously not a miserable, abysmal failure, but having those opportunities to be able to try things and fail and not have to succeed in every single thing. What happens is they learn how to get back up. And if they learn how to get back up, then they're going to be able to survive college. Because for the first time in most of their lives, unless you were really forward thinking and gave them opportunities to go and have certain independences, what happens is that they will get to college and inevitably something will happen where they fail. It could be in grades and things like that. It could be in some social situation. It could be merely because they like fail in terms, their roommate's an atheist and is really hostile to faith, and they just can't answer the questions, and they feel like they're failing them, their friend. It could be something like that. But what happens is that if they haven't learned how to fail through the experience of failing, then there's a harsh judgment levied upon them. And it comes from within. And I'm sure we all experience this in some way, where we judge ourselves and find ourselves lacking, and that ends up becoming self-hate and self-doubt. And that's where stress and anxiety and sadness starts to really settle in. So at a young age, what's one of the best things we can do is allow our young people to get into a situation where they can try something and they can fail. They know what their gifts are, but they also know what their weaknesses are, and they accept them. They accept them. They try to strive past some and recognize that, you know what, I'm just not good at that. And I'm okay with that. So I think in that, it's very important as well for them to be able to learn how to express their hopes and dreams and desires, and also to express their needs. A lot of times we're looking for the opportunity to provide for all their needs, and it's beautiful, it's a great act of love. But what can happen in the midst of that as well is that we provide for all their needs, so they never learn how to express that need themselves. They never learn how to cry out for it. And that's very important in friendship. College, I think probably most of us might remember college as that time where we met some of the best friends of our life. That is not happening as much today. It's happening, thankfully, at places like my campus ministry and things like that. I'm very happy about that. But I noticed that there's a great amount of loneliness in our college campuses today. And I mean, I'm not speaking just of George Mason, I have wider experience in that. But because people haven't learned how to express their need and be vulnerable, what happens is they often have fear of really opening up. And so they actually don't have those great friendships. So we can help them to learn how to be vulnerable by encouraging them to be in small, intentional groups. Like I would say small group discussions. I know at the retreat they were doing small group discussions. That I'm finding, and that we find today, is the most effective form of youth ministry and youth gathering possible. More than any big events and speakers and all these. These are nice, but they're kind of useless in youth groups. But what the real youth groups that thrive are the ones that help them have small, intentional communities where they can get together and talk about deep stuff and really be challenged to think more deeply. And with that, then we can start asking, what motivates them? Like, listen to their stories, trying to understand what motivates them, what moves their heart. What are those aspects of themselves that God has made uniquely and unrepeatably that allows them to really thrive? I want to recommend a book to you. It's a beautiful book. It's written. It's called Unrepeatable: Cultivating the Unique Calling of Every Person. Unrepeatable. It's by Luke Burgess and Joshua Miller. Luke is the entrepreneur in residence at Catholic University, and Joshua Miller teaches at Steubenville Franciscan University in Ohio. And both of them put together this wonderful book that is really, it's just like a life workbook. I use this book with my students quite a bit in just hearing their stories. Like, when did you feel the most alive in life? Tell me a story where you told me you just felt the most alive. I was watching as I came in the freshman football. I think they were freshmen. They looked small, so I'm assuming they were not the big ones. If so, then I would have been better at football. But I was watching them, and it was so great because I was watching a couple of things I was celebrating on the field. They made a lot of mistakes. But I was watching, even for 15 minutes, I watched the same players they made a mistake, and then the second time the ball came to them, they did not make the same mistake. So they learned from their failure, which was great, and they were supporting each other. But what was also amazing is watching them, you saw the little victories they had, and some of them they were tackled, and they popped up, and they were just alive. And I'm like, that was, something happens there. They came alive there. We see that in acting a lot. When students are in the creative arts, when they find their voice and they really are able to come alive, and you just see them, there's that moment on stage where they're present. For the first time, they're present to that experience. That's this book is about, is helping them to find that motivation. Because if we hope they're going to find it when they go to college, there might not be someone there to mentor them through that. I hope there will be, and we'll go into that. But you're there now to help them to really find, to articulate their experience, and also to articulate yours. You know, I think the two biggest things that young people learn from are their parents and the saints. Because they read the lives of the saints, they get very excited. I mean, when I preach about the lives of the saints and really try to bring it to life, I can see my students, their eyes light up. They find a compatriot in the cause of holiness, and they're like, yeah, I really relate with Philip Neri. I really relate with Therese of Lisieux. I really relate with Pier Giorgio Frassati, whoever it is. They're like, they relate with them. But they also relate with you. They might not show it. You know, it's not cool to show that your parents that they respect and love you. But they want to hear your story. Like, what motivates you? How did you discover yourself? How did you discover what enlivens you? How did you discover your spouse? It's like, what's your love story? How did you discover what you were going to study in college? Or what you were going to do professionally? But like, really get into it. I think we're afraid to be vulnerable with our kids. Now, obviously, we're not supposed to like bear all of our mistakes and faults and things like that. Maybe when they get older, we can be a little more frank and honest with that. But to be able to like, let them hear that you're human, that you struggled through these things, that you had difficulties, that there was blood, sweat, and tears involved in it. Tell them about your failures, professionally, academically, athletically, whatever they're into, that they can relate with. Because by hearing that, they'll be able to articulate their own. In the same way that when they were little kids and it was professional day, they went in and they made a presentation, probably about, if it wasn't about being a fireman or a police officer or an astronaut, it was what you did. Right? Because they want to be like you. In some way, they want to be like you. But they need to hear your story. And that's really part of it, isn't it? Our identity comes from, we sit around the fire and hear the stories of the tribe. That hasn't changed. That basic sociology still holds true. They want to hear your story. And then, well, let me tell you a little bit about my story. Maybe you can hear it. We talk about there's different aspects of God, right? Truth, goodness, beauty, unity. All these things are aspects of God. I love talking about these a lot. And when we see something beautiful, it shows me an aspect of God. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you stand there at sunset and you look over the rim of the canyon. I don't know how anyone could be an atheist, because it's just, there's something within us that just moves. To stand in the Sistine Chapel, or to hold a baby, an infant, and to stare into their eyes. It's like a baby's eyes and campfires are the two things you just stare at forever. There's something beautiful there. In my life, I remember watching the first thing I recognized when I was younger was the goodness of my parents. Like, my mom and dad love each other. They're in their early 70s now, and they are just, we just had their 47th wedding anniversary dinner last night, and I just loved that I was there with them. We were at the restaurant. I was just talking to them. We were hearing about all the grandkids and my brothers and sister and all these things, and I was just like, you're so good. Like, just their goodness. They're good. They're, the way they serve. You know, they're like grandparents that just like, they're always like, they're giving and serving. I'm like, wow. And I remember as a kid, the first thing I noticed was like just how good my parents were, even when I wasn't so good to them. Or did I think they weren't good and I rebelled? And I used to rebel a lot. I was really good at putting my fist through white wall. And I was just really good at getting angry. I'd go into my room and I'd punch the wall and put my fist through it. And then I learned how to fix the white wall, or drywall, which is cool. So, but the goodness. Then I remember a second thing that struck me is, like, when I was in college, I studied in Rome for a semester. And I was just overcome with the beauty of what I saw. Life became like so wide. There were so many possibilities. Every week we were traveling to a new place, experiencing a new thing, and it was just, life was beautiful. Whether it was what we saw, what we ate, what we heard, what we experienced, the beauty of different cultures, it was great. We saw the beauty of it. And then in class, in college especially, but my first experience of like authentic truth, my senior year of high school, I actually did it at a place called Northridge Preparatory School in Chicago. My dad got a new job, so the family moved up there. I had to move at the end of my junior year, which was terrible. But I remember we read Moby Dick, my favorite novel, and the professor, the teacher, brought this story to life. And I heard like these, it was like the truths that Herman Melville were talking about, the truths of life, the truths of reality, the truths of adventure, the truths of the danger and the scariness of life and nature and all these things. And it was so amazing. And then of course the oneness of my friendships, that unity. But something that I noticed in those deep friendships and all these things is I had all these questions. And no matter how much beauty I got, it was never enough. No matter how much beauty that there was, no matter how much truth I heard in school, I wanted more. No matter how good my parents and the other people around me were, there was always more goodness I wanted. And no matter how many friends I had, and I had a lot, I wanted more. So why was this insatiable need in my heart, in my very guts? Why was this need there if it couldn't be fulfilled? If I desire it, there must be more. And that's when I first discovered God. But I discovered God not because, I knew about Him, or I was taught about Him. My family taught me, and my parents were very good at teaching me my faith. I heard the truth in my schooling and from the pulpit and all these other things, most of the time. From my schooling and all this stuff. But it wasn't mine until I recognized that religious sense within me, that need, where everything else fell short. And then that's when I wanted God. Not because I was told that I should do it, or because it was the culture that my tribe came from, but because I wanted Him. This is what we can instill in our children, that deep hunger, the deep sense, so that more and more they will want Him themselves. You know, they say that 80% of students lose their faith when they go to college. I don't believe that. I believe that 80% of them never had it. And what happens is that they went to Catholic, yes, we hear it all the time. Yeah, I went to Catholic, I grew up going to Catholic school. Nice. It doesn't necessarily mean they're Catholic. Or, my parents are Catholic, I grew up Catholic, whatever it was. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, who nourishes you with His very self in the sacraments? Do you know Him? Tell me about Jesus. Tell me about Him. Not tell me stories about Him. Tell me a story about Him in your life. Well, how are they going to do that? The first way is to hear your story. What's your story of Jesus? I wish I had time tonight to hear all of your stories. Because the more you're able to explain that, articulate that, and they see the conviction in you, and see the conviction growing, because you might not have that conviction right now. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I'm going to send my kid to Catholic school, and it's because it's good, it's better than the public schools, and whatever it might be. Or maybe you do. Maybe you have that deep, profound friendship with Him, that you trust Him. And then when you're able to articulate that, and they hear that, and they may reject it, and that's fine. They're free. But they will remember it. And when that desire is in them, when this desire for beauty, then bring them and show them beautiful things. Bring them to the cathedrals and to the art museums. I do tours of the National Gallery of Art for our students and missionaries and all the other people. And I love it. I love doing it because when you do it, you see them. They see for the first time in a new way. This piece of art, which was just this nice thing on the wall, now speaks the truth of their life. They relate to it. And I love giving the tours because you always have people come, they follow you, they're like, what's going on? Like the tourist that's just listening. But they can, through an experience, start to see the beautiful, and they start to want to know that truth that's piercing through it. They start to have an encounter with God. Give them those encounters. Let them have those encounters. Ask them those questions to bring them out. I would say that some of the things that we can work on, some of the things that we can really try to work on ourselves and teach them to as they get ready for school is how to work with anxiety. Anxiety is probably it's the number one psychological challenge today in our culture. I think there's between that and depression, we're kind of battling those two things. But to really help them to work with anxiety, it means that we have to too. I mean, some of the problems in families that children see is overly anxious moms and emotionally unavailable dads. Those are like the kind of the two psychological things that we're encountering in families. And what happens is that we need to be able to give them not only a compelling story of our faith, but also to be able to have that availability and also the calm of trust in God. And then finally, when it comes to our faith, in preparing them, approaching our faith in a whole new way, perhaps. People are very aware of what the Catholic Church is against, but I don't know if they necessarily know what we're for. So I'd say that the approach that we have to make to the faith is one of affirmative orthodoxy. What do we say yes to? Like, what is our yes? It's not the finger-wagging no of the past, but rather, what's the affirmative proposal? That proposal of the truth that says, this is the fullness of human happiness, the fullness of human thriving. This is what it looks like to have a flourishing, beautiful life. And we're against anything that's not that. Because we're all about fullness. We're all about the beauty. So obviously people can say, the church is against premarital sex. Do they know the beauty and awesomeness of sex? Or is it just the no? So it's like really trying to discover our faith in that beautiful, positive, affirmative, the yes way. And I think what happens is you start to see people, they come alive with that. They're like, yeah, I want that. How can I get that? And we have to be very sly in discussing it, right? We have to make it very attractive. But when we do that, they see our conviction. It's not through programs. It's not through different things saying, how can we increase our Catholic identity? How can we increase our Catholic identity? By living the gospel fullness and the affirmative yes to the faith, to the affirmative yes of Jesus Christ. And then from there, they can start to develop that immense curiosity. I want to know more about him. I want to know more about the truth. And they walk into a library like this, and they're like, what do these books have to say about this? They start to have a curiosity of their friends. Tell me about yourself. Why? Because we've asked them to tell us about themselves. They learn through our inquisitiveness how to be inquisitive and loving. And they learn from the stories of the tribe. Tell them the stories of your family. A lot of times people don't know their grandparents today. I hope if your parents are still alive, please, even if they're difficult, please let your kids get to know them. And they're going to always be difficult, right? When people get older, they get very difficult. But we're getting difficult. I know, I'm 46, I'm starting to feel my difficulty already. So with that, why don't we just stop there for a second, then we're going to go into college. But do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts? Anything for me? Is that an awkward moment where everyone's like, I don't want to be the first one to speak? Why don't we pretend we already heard from that person?
Father Searby, thank you for being here. I just want to note that I went to George Mason myself, and I refer to it as the Harvard of Fairfax County.
It is Harvard of Fairfax County. So
you may use that.
I was just in Cambridge in June, and I was referring to it as the George Mason of the North. So it's great. It was great to go up there. It's great. What is there anything that I've said that you say, all right, well that's okay, that's good. Like that really struck a chord with me. Anything that we can expound? Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that you brought up, and I just read something about this. I was I don't even know what football player it was, but I was reading this book article, and he said that his faith fully became his own when he went to college.
Yeah, Daryl Green just gave a talk about that.
I don't know who it is, but I had never really thought about it that way. That right now it's just an expectation that we all go to church on Sundays, and it's not something that's child-driven. It's kind of like, this is what we do. And I just thought it was an interesting way to look at that, next year, it's my daughter's choice, and it really becomes her faith and what she wants to do with it. And so, it'll be kind of interesting to see. but I hadn't looked at it from that sort of.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I see that all the time. I'm in a great position where I get to see our college students and the amount of students that come. We're the largest student organization on campus. We're bigger than any of the fraternities or sororities or any of the athletic things and stuff like that. And looking at the number of students of all different years that come get involved in campus ministry. A lot of people think campus ministry is like glorified youth group, or it's the island of broken toys, or whatever it might be. As people often think that. Actually, in an age where people are having trouble making very deep, profound friendships, the campus ministries are really the place where people aren't afraid to do that, because they are willing to have some vulnerability, because they're having it to God. I think one of the things that's just a thought that I have here is in helping our kids keep this relationship with Jesus Christ in college, is keep the faith. That's a very big word, it's a very big concept. But to help them have that relationship with Him, a very personal one, and this might sound a little Protestant, a little provocative from a Catholic priest, but it's absolutely necessary, is to have that personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And how do I do that? By allowing Him into my life, by allowing the Scriptures into my life. So I would recommend this. And this is absolutely imperative. We often only hear the Scripture as Catholics when we go to Mass. And to the credits of our Protestant brothers and sisters, when they critique the Catholic Church, they'll often say that you're not rooted in Scripture. And you know what? That's very true sometimes. So my advice to you would be, have a Scripture study together. And when I hear the word study, it's like work. No, to read the Scripture that of the upcoming Sunday, the next Sunday, at a family meal. Or maybe we could motivate them to like sit and just pray one-on-one. Like, will you pray with me? And I know that can be sometimes like moving a boulder up a hill. But at the same time, if they see that you're joyful in it, not sit down and read the Scripture, you know what I mean? Like, no, but like out of joy and peace, it's just, this brings me joy. This brings them, like, I'm very relaxed when I do this. They may have that opportunity to be able to be with you to do that. And then share what their opinions and thoughts, it might be completely wrong, but their opinions, thoughts, like what does this, how would they craft? If they were going to preach about this, what would they craft? How does this sync with their experience? Like, have you ever had an experience of this? You know, think of, Peter's opens his mouth. So he's always opening his mouth. He's saying the most audacious things. And 1 minute he's like, yes, I'm on fire. We'll die with you. You're the Christ. And then the next one is like, no, don't go to Jerusalem and die. Get behind me, Satan. What? Oh my gosh, I failed, right? Have you ever felt like Peter, where 1 minute you were doing something good and the next minute you were a complete failure and you were doing something bad and how did that feel? But we have to go very much to their feelings first, because when you're an adolescent, feelings are almost all there is. But that will allow them to be heard and to see that the Scripture speaks my language, it speaks the language of my need, and that's going to be beautiful. And what happens is that now when they go and hear that Scripture story at the Mass, it's very much alive to them. They've already contemplated it. And then hopefully the priest will preach about something, they'll bring up whether it's affirm what they've thought, or deepen what they've thought, or give them a new idea of what they thought, and then that can be talked about. But if that becomes a habit, what will happen is that when they go off to college, they're a little more rooted. And especially those of you who have younger students, or not like seniors who are getting ready to check out, but like the young, and they're checking out in like 4 weeks. So that's when the checkout starts, right? As soon as the college applications are in, because there's nothing more you can do, right? At least they think. So that's a great ability to be able to do. I think another thing, yes?
Okay, so this is a more sort of a practical
Yeah,
question.
practical's good.
You're talking about campus ministry.
Yeah.
When they go off to college, are there multiple campus ministries, each for like Catholic versus Protestant versus, or are they?
It depends on the school.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then how do they find it?
It depends on the school. So I'll talk about like what happens at George Mason and what happens in a lot of schools. At the beginning of the school year, so hopefully like people who are motivated they're gonna find out about the campus ministries. But at the beginning of the year, what we do is we have what's called the 168, the first 168 hours of school. And this is very important. This is a study that was actually done by the Baptists. The first 168 hours of college is where the vast majority of people meet the friends and organizations that they are going to be members of for the next 4 to 5 years of college. Okay, so that first week of school is absolutely imperative. So what we do, we get all our student leaders together and we just blitz. I mean, we have event after event. We have a huge luau of like 1,700 students come to it. We have our missionaries are out meeting people. The next day after the luau, we're playing pickup soccer games. This year we had like 80 guys come out and play soccer. It was awesome. All these different activities. And what happens is that through that week, they're trying to get people to commit to be in one of their Bible study small groups and to just hang out, to come have coffee. If you don't drink coffee when you go to college, like start, because it's the only way to get and things like that. And what happens is they start to meet these friends. The fraternities and sororities do the same kind of thing. Every organization on campus does the same kind of thing. The ones who do it best are the ones who are going to succeed in getting people. I'm not against fraternities and sororities. I am against a lot of the things that they do. Because I think they make it okay to live immorally your first few weeks of school. And I just don't think that brings happiness. So how do they meet them at schools? I'm going to give you a bit of advice. Please don't send your students, to a school that doesn't have a Catholic church nearby and like some sort of campus ministry. Because what happens is they go to school and they're just lost. And there may be a priest will show up every couple of weeks, but they don't have the sacraments, and there's nothing's going on. And quite frankly, it's just, we're like doling out $50,000 a year for them to lose their faith. It's a very expensive proposition. So I think it's like getting them to be interested in schools that have some sort of campus ministry, or at least a good priest or some good religious or some good lay people who have, or where there's a movement or something in the school. That's huge, because I see it all the time. Like students who really were passionate about their faith in our schools, and they go up to college and there's just nothing there, and they don't not even like fall into a lot of evil. They fall into like kind of a mediocrity, because for no fault of their own, there's just no opportunity to be able to have community. And I'll see parents who are like, I'm so proud of my kid, they're doing so well in school. I'm like, yeah, but they're not growing in moral virtue, they're not growing in faith, they're being formed to be a good professional, so they can sit in an office the rest of their life and wonder if there was something more out of life. And I'm very passionate about that, because I see, it's like when I see a spirit squashed, I get angry. And so I think it's like, wherever they're going is the opportunity. They might reject the opportunity, but at least the opportunity is there for them to be able to have that. It's a proposition, it's an offer, you see. How do they find it? Well, the campus ministries are pretty good at advertising nowadays and stuff. And at George Mason, we have tons. It's not just the Catholics. I'm part of the Campus Ministry Association, and regularly, like once every couple of weeks, I get together with the Jews and the Muslims and the Baptists and the evangelicals and all the different groups. And it's great. I mean, I have good friendships with other ministers of different faiths. We have a good laugh. We celebrate each other's holidays. Stuff like Rosh Hashanah, love it. Right? It's like, Yom Kippur, not as much. But like, I mean, celebrating all these different things with them is great. We'll break the fast of Ramadan with them and things, so it's wonderful. Ishtar, I think they call that feast. But anyway, yeah, so, I mean, it depends where they go. All right, good. What other questions? Any other thoughts before? Okay, why don't we go to towards the end here, and then we can go to questions. A word about campus ministry. How can I judge if it's a good campus ministry? I'm going to tell you. If there's good opportunities at a school. The first one is, who are they? Are they just a big youth group that does things once in a while? Or I hate that. Like that's just my first, like parish youth groups that just get together and they have like social things. That's nice, but if they're not performing them in some way, they're really just a waste of time and money. But if you look, it's like, does the priest have the passion for the gospel? Like, does he know Jesus? Does he speak with conviction? Does he preach? Is there sacramental availability? Like, how often do they have confessions? How often do they have Eucharistic adoration? If it's once a week, why? Is it because might be that he's got 4 parishes or something, he's just there. But if they have a full-time chaplain and that's just it, then what's going on? That's a good question. is there a maturity of mentality in the students becoming adults, or are they keeping them, are they kind of holding them back in this perpetual adolescence? You can tell by the way they worship or by the way they would do things at their group gatherings. Is they're trying to form them to be adults that are going to be, passionate adults, or is it more like emotive faith and things like that is not like really giving this solid truth of the faith? Are they forming them in those 4 areas, the human, intellectual, spiritual, and apostolic? Do they have a means of formation for all those different things? And then, like, do the students engage when you go to the campus minister? Are they engaging? Are they getting in conversations with your students? Are they apostolic themselves? Do they have a zeal? And how much interaction do they have with the university? So is the campus ministry part of the university, maybe at a Catholic school? Is it accepted by the university? I know George Mason is very happy and pleased that we have a really good relationship with the university. The president's coming to speak in a few weeks at our campus ministry. And that's really important because they're feeding each other, right? We see each other as value-added partners in helping people flourish, which is great. And then the Mass, I think. Like, if you go and the Mass is just kooky, it's going to be a kooky formation that they receive. Okay, it's just the way it is. Good. How can they keep the faith? Let's give you a couple of ideas of what we can do now. Okay. So the first thing is help them have a plan of life. And if they have a good spiritual director, or like I highly recommend, encourage them to come talk to Father. To have that ability to be able to just have that plan of life for prayer. What are their daily rituals? Like, do they have a morning ritual, an evening ritual? In other words, do they live order? Are they trying to grow in having proper rest? All these different kinds of things. But that plan of life is very important. Do they have a daily plan of prayer? And we should all have that, of course, as well. Like, this is the kind of prayer I'm going to do every day. This is how long I'm going to dedicate to it. I commit myself to this. Right? And people might say, well, I don't really have time to pray. Well, if we're too busy to pray, then we're too busy. And we have to make some cuts. So maybe like in the morning or in the evening, having even that family time of prayer. Now, if there's little ones around, that's difficult. But to have that time to say, look, we're going to have 20 minutes every evening. That's when we go do our prayer. However you're going to pray. But that's where we like shut down and just have our silence. No phones, no TVs, no, just 15, 20 minutes. In other words, a manageable amount of silence. I highly recommend to you to help them to learn, and for you to learn yourself, mindfulness meditation. Learning how to do mindfulness meditation is very important to just deal with anxiety and stress. There's really 2 good apps for the phone that I can recommend to you. Headspace and Calm. 2 great apps. I use Headspace every day. When students come into me and they're like stressed and have things going on, I actually sit down and we do like a 10-minute mindfulness meditation just to get them to breathe, relax, focus on like clearing their mind. It's amazing. They'll just go, thank you, wow. I didn't realize that was possible. And then we can have a great conversation. So maybe start there. Maybe they don't want to pray, but just learning how to just relax. It's not weird. It's not like transcendental meditation. Don't do that. That's weird, right? But like just relaxing prayer. Intentional discipleship. So what's the thing? Get them to invite a small group of their friends over just to like hang out in the backyard, in the basement, whatever it is. But then help them, like, give them some questions to talk about. It doesn't have to be about religion. Just like, what are your hopes, dreams, desires? What are your, I mentioned that book. There's the Unrepeatable, that book. This is a great companion workbook that they made that actually just has questions just for professional development. You know, it's like different questions, like how we deal with certain things. But it's wonderful to like begin that dialogue. Maybe in school, where they can be like small group discussions or something. Maybe if they go on a retreat and there was a small group, then have them continue to bring that small group. Because students need that constant interaction with one another to hear, my friend's growing in this way, I'm growing in this way, we're both growing, we're both having challenges, we all have struggles with the same thing, whatever it might be. It also gives them a level of accountability for the things they struggle with so that they're able to really help each other, work with each other. I know as a priest, like I have I regularly get together with a small group of priests, and we're very open and honest with each other. We talk, and I don't know how anybody lives without that. So I want to recommend that to you. Like men, ladies, get together. Men, get together with other men. Ladies, get together with other women and talk. Talk about like the deep stuff of life, right? And let your kids see it. Because when they see that that's life-giving to you, they're going to want that with their friends. Let it be Christocentric, as I said. Not to talk about the faith, but talk about this relationship with Jesus Christ. Which is the faith? This relationship with Jesus Christ. What's your relationship? Ask people. Like if you have someone over for dinner, and it might sound very evangelical, that's okay. That's okay. We can learn from them too. But to say like, what's your relationship? Tell me about your relationship with Jesus Christ. Like when was the first time you had a religious awakening, a religious experience? Can you tell me about that? Encountering God through beauty, I talked about before. I think in our world today, truth, easily rejected. Goodness, easily devalued. Beauty. People love beauty. Just like watching a beautiful movie together, or going and seeing something beautiful, letting it just stir you. You know, when you go to the beach, like wake up early and like sit and watch the sunrise. We just had our beach retreat. My students, almost all of them woke up. We had 75 students on retreat. Almost all of them woke up early. We were at Sandbridge. And they went out. I just sat on my balcony and watched this. It was great. Because, you know, sometimes like dad shouldn't get involved. You just watch, let them do their thing. And they were all there and they were just watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. And at one point, like you see like all these guys like just sitting there like, leaning on each other as like young guys do. Yeah. It was awesome. Like they had an experience of beauty that awoke in them something about God. I want to recommend you, like, don't dumb the faith down to them. Like, challenge them. Really grow in the intellectual knowledge of the faith. It's robust. It's rich. They need to hear it. What happens a lot of times we want to try to make it easy for them or palatable for them, and it doesn't challenge them. And so it makes them bored. And they're like, there's got to be more than this. And guess what? The atheists and the new atheists and the thinkers of this world, when they go to college, they're going to give them something more. And just like Bishop Robert Barron always says, he goes, the atheists aren't asking the wrong questions. They just stop asking the questions when they get interested. And so it's like helping them to really like answer those questions today. Really study the new atheism and understand. That's the thing that we're dealing with today. It's not, most of them are not going to go off to college and have to like do apologetics with other Protestants. For the most part, it's going to be the nuns, and N-O-N-E-S, right? It's going to be the nuns, sometimes sadly the other nuns too, but it's going to be the nuns, it's going to be the atheists, right? And it's just this radical secularism. But they need to know the answers to those questions. I know in religion class, Mr. Offer, or Doctor, sorry, that's what I devalued the other. But with Tom, you know, it's like here, it's like this is so important that they need to know in the universities how to answer and address these questions of the nuns and of the atheists. And then finally, the two things, just being grounded in the Eucharist. Go make visits with them. That's one of the most beautiful things that I've seen in my life. My parents, from as early as I can remember, my dad would come home from work, except when the kids were super little, but then I'm the oldest of 7, so like I got old enough to watch them for a little while. But they would get in the car in the evening, and they'd go make their visit. And they'd drive to the local church. They wouldn't go in because it was locked usually. They'd drive to the local church. They'd make a visit to the Blessed Sacrament just from the car. They'd know that Jesus was right beyond the glass or the wall, whatever it was. And then on the way home, that's when they talked about, that's when they communicated and talked about what was going on in their hearts, what was going on in their lives, what was going on in our lives. Later, my dad would sometimes be like, I'm going to go make a visit, you want to make a visit with me? And it was like that opportunity to be able to go just spend time with my dad one-on-one. And my sister would do it with my mom, you know, my brothers would do it with my dad. It was that time of seeing my dad pray was huge for me as a young man. Because it's like, well, if he can do it, and I look up to him, I can. And finally, serve. Go serve together. Let them see you serving the poor. I know that's very hard, and it seems very scary, because we want to like protect our kids from the possibility of bad people or hurt and stuff. I think we need to stop protecting them so much. Because what's happening is we're contracepting them from an authentic encounter with humanity. And so what happens is we talk a good show, but if they don't actually like hold a poor person's hand, and like smell them, or like feed the poor and the hungry, or if they don't like go out to like, you know, the person who's rejected, if we don't, as the Holy Father says, if we don't go out to the peripheries with them, they'll never go. So let's go with them and show them how to love. And when they see you picking up the child, when they see you holding the poor person, when they see you reaching in your pocket or taking off your jacket and giving it to them, that is going to transform their life, and they're going to be apostolic. Okay? That's how we're going to keep their faith in college, because it starts from our hearts. So that's all I've got to say about that. Hopefully that helped you. Any other questions or thoughts?
Where can we find that book you mentioned?
Amazon,
Amazon.
where you can find, you know,
1975.
everything. Yeah. So yeah, it's on Amazon. Unrepeatable by Luke Burgess and Joshua Miller. And it's really worth it for us too, kind of find out what's motivating to me. I use their book, by the way, at Campus Ministry. There's actually an online, something called the M-Core that they use, the Motivational Core Assessment. So I'll sit down with students that are really coming for, I do both spiritual direction and life coaching type stuff. So what I do is I'll do like study skills. We have a program we're starting called the Accelerator program, where I'm teaching them study skills based on cognitive behavioral therapeutic means. And so what happens is that we take those therapeutic methodologies and use them to show them how they can enter into a deep state of work, and or we call flow, and really being able to be like most effective in their study skills, and stop multitasking and stuff like that. It's amazing how much that transforms them. So teaching them how to work well, because the way we work is the way we live, and then helping them understand what motivates you, what's the things in your life that are exciting, and then helping to put all that together into a plan, where then mixed with their plan of life for their spiritual life, they can go have that life of human flourishing. So that's what I think ultimately a campus ministry should be, not just an experience and an encounter with Jesus and a fruitfulness of that, but also, do they help them be better humans? So, yes?
Father, how do you address the issue of social media with college students and parents when it seems there's so much attention paid to an image or putting it out on social
Yeah.
media, which is, from my perspective, not really authentic, but it seems to be kids.
No, actually it's horrible, because social media can also cause a great deal of narcissism, and create narcissistic personality disorders. Well, the first thing, the good news is that less and less students are using social media. I know my students do not use it as much as people 5 to 10 years ago, by any means. Facebook is hardly used. They don't go on Instagram, they go on to share pictures. But I'm seeing social media starting to, even if it's like the big, great, actually I think social media is a bigger problem for our demographic.
I'm a baby boomer, though, I'm not a child.
Oh, come on. No, but so as far as that, social media is like becoming less and less of a college students are like more immersed in other things. But as far as it goes, just asking how much time. I love it on the new, like Apple iOS has the ability to tell you how much time you spend on different apps, and it'll give you a report every week, and it's nice to see like, wow, I spent 10 hours on social media, I have a problem, right? That kind of thing. So it'll like show it to you.
But you don't see with students, like I could say, with even being on the beach this summer, you see the children bathing suits and they're taking 20 pictures of themselves.
They do, yeah. No, I mean they do. I mean there's obviously a problem with it.
Just enjoy the beach.
Well, but I think and then we have to ask another question. It's like, what's motivating you? What are you saying about yourself? Like, this is something that's good, is to ask this question on a very professional point of view, is what's your personal brand? Like, let's sit down and analyze your personal brand. What is it saying about you? How have you branded yourself in the market? Right? And what happens is that if you analyze the brands, you might say that you're, selfish, narcissistic, and don't care about anybody but yourself. That's a problem, right? But if you look and say, no, you're highlighting other people, you're putting people together, you're trying to create events that you're inviting people to, and then you're celebrating and affirming them, that's a good use of social media, right? So that's a good brand. So I think it's important to look at personal branding. It might be a good talk to have at another time. I know I talk to my students about personal branding, even with jobs. We have people come in and talk in depth on how to use LinkedIn to create a personal brand at 18, so that by the time you're 22 and you're looking for a job, Like, you've had a developed brand over time, and people are seeing that, and they're cultivating that. So we can see the social media as a tool, or we can see social media as a threat. I think we can see it as both, but we have to be very careful. They're going to use it, so like, we can either demonize it, or we can show them how to use it well. Does it make sense? And know it ourselves. Like, we need to know how to use this stuff ourselves, right? Because if we're like, this stuff is terrible, then what happens is, then we're not relevant to them. They're like, we don't get it. But if we get it, and we get it better than them, then they'll be like, wow, okay, show me, teach me. Teach me how to use this. Does that make sense?
Two things. Number one is you were talking about daily prayer. So I think getting our students started earlier to have a daily prayer book, and it's just a simple, there's all different varieties out there, but that gets them started to have that, because they may not think about, what do I want to pray for, but they can make those little suggestions. So little daily prayer aids or books. Second thing, it seems kind of obvious, is that having a family Bible out in the living room, okay?
Yeah.
And that it's visible, because you were talking about reading scripture. So something we did a number of years ago, now it's probably 10 years ago, I went to a bookstore and purchased a kit to put tabs in our St. Joseph Bible.
That's awesome.
And they're color-coded.
So they see how the books are laid out.
It shows you how it's laid, and it's amazing that we will look at that, and a lot of people don't even think about it, but when you look at it, you say, what are those yellow tabs? Okay, those are the wisdom books. What are the wisdom books? Okay, that's Job, and so, but also, what's the shortest book in the Bible? You can go look and see what's the least number of pages. And then in certain Bibles, like St. Joseph Bible, will at the beginning of each tab will tell you a little narrative about Ecclesiastes, and so that.
Yeah, it's just the inquisitiveness about like, what's
part,
before me.
Right, and then when there's something that's after a sermon that we might hear that you said on campus, I might go back and say, what was that? And then show them that that's that curiosity to go and look it up, right? So that's just a suggestion for all families, that I think the little tab, I've suggested that ever since it really started working for us.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, and it's caused, as I said, an inquisitiveness. It's just they're interested, what is this? They'll pick it up, they'll read it. But I think it's good, like, have little things that are very personalized, like get a beautiful Bible. Have them have a personal Bible. My students have the coolest, like, little leather bound with the zipper, and they put like their prayer card. It's just so cool. I'm like, I want that Bible. That's really cool. It just looks nice, right? And they have the nice journal. Like, journaling is a great way of praying for students because they get it out. They get it out of their head. It's good for us as well, just even if it's bullet pointing, just so that we're like writing a conversation with God. It keeps us focused. I always have my students, like the guys, we do a brosary every week. So it's like the guys get together and do the rosary together, a brosary. And we all, like, guys slowly but surely are getting these, like, they're tactical rosaries made out of, like, parachute cord and metal and spurs. And it's cool. Like, it's just, like, you can, like, pray for your attacker while you're smacking him. You know what I mean? So those things are great. You know, like, those little things that are very personalized. They feel very, this is mine. I want this. I used to give little small pocket crosses to students sometimes. Be like, hey, just keep this in your pocket. And I, to this day, will sometimes run into people who like have lived very sordid lives, but they'll reach in their pocket and they still have that pocket cross. And they're like, this has gotten me through things. I'm like, even that little thing is just great. So, any other questions or thoughts, comments, obfuscations? Yeah?
You had mentioned a number of things about campus ministries and what makes a good campus ministry. How do you get a sense of that when you're going to these colleges and you're there for like the one in preview day and you're rushing from library to dorm room and everything?
Yeah.
To really get a sense of what the campus ministry is like.
I think the best thing is, first of all, is go online. Go online and look at what activities they have and stuff. Nowadays, most campus ministries have a social media presence, as well as like YouTube and things like that. So they might even have, like, our talks are on YouTube. So you can go on and see the kind of speakers they have, how many students are there, what kind of interactions are going on. It requires a little bit of like research, but also just stopping into the campus ministries. Obviously, when you go, and there's a whole part of this talk I didn't do, but like what to look for when you go on a university visit. Remember, universities, it's like they're going to show you their best. They're a business, and they're all about getting students, putting butts in the seats, and retaining them. Those are the two most important things for universities. And so they're going to have the best marketing plan possible. Campus ministries usually are not as savvy with that, mainly because we don't have the staff and funding to be able to do it. But to be able to see, like, what's their week look like? When are the sacraments available? So I know, like, we have daily mass and I have confessions available every day but Saturday. And that's just because all the parishes have it on Saturday. You know, so do they make that available? What do they have different activities for formation? So are they just doing social things, or is there also apostolic stuff? Do they have classes? Do they offer a class? Do they have a relationship with the university where they will actually like be able to, for instance, maybe some campus ministries and the really big ones, they offer classes for credit at the university. I know I'll be teaching a class at the university in the spring called Religion and Film, and it'll be in a credit. I'll be on campus teaching in a professor's room, that's great. I mean, like, what kind of relationship do they have? Is there a full-time priest? What kind of staff do they have? If they have a big staff, chances are they probably have a lot going on. I think one of the biggest things you can ask is focus there. We have 7 focus missionaries at our campus. If a campus ministry has focus, chances are they are dedicated to intentional discipleship at that campus. And they've made the investment to have focus missionaries there. So I think we couldn't do what we do without. Our focus missionaries are so on fire. They're on campus, what they call barehanding, like meeting people every day, doing evangelical missionary work. But they're running Bible studies. They're helping form these students. This year I think I have 8 students applying to be focus missionaries next year. It's beautiful. So another thing that you can tell the health of a university campus ministry is what are their vocations? Like, do people enter the priesthood and religious life? Do they have marriage prep available? Are people getting married? Are they teaching them about the married life? And things like that. That's another one. You know, do they have guys in the seminary? Stuff like that. That's a good one. You can always tell the health even of a parish. Do they have vocations coming from the parish? Health of a school. Do they have vocations coming from the school? So, do you have a wall? You do have a wall.
With pictures.
Yeah, we need to hear all that.
Right outside of Brother Schultz's office.
There we go. Good. Good. Well, if there's any other questions, I'll let you know. Sorry I talked so long.
Just have a quick one.
Yeah.
Do you know how much longer you're going to be at Virginia?
For a long time.
Okay.
At least that's what I'm told.
Okay.
So I'm assuming I'll be there quite a while. At a university, at a public university, the priest is, I'm the living memory because the students come and go. It's not like a parish where the parishioners are there and the priests usually come and go. At a university, it's like people get to know me, you know, at the administrative level. And so it's great. I mean, I love being there. I absolutely love it. And I never thought I would have so much fun. So, you know, on a daily basis, I'm at a sports game. I'm going to like a top-notch theatrical performance. And I hear confessions constantly. There's constant spiritual direction. It's wonderful. So it's just, yeah, I really love it.
You had mentioned, when we were talking about confirmation, and a lot of them just, I think it's high school, what's your opinion, why is that?
I think for a couple,
if it's instilled in the home.
Yeah, I think for a couple of reasons. I think, well, we put them in gowns and they make it feel like graduation. So that's one thing. I think it's just definitely in the culture. Usually lowest common denominator, so there's people who don't care. That's going to spread, right? And I think in a lot of ways we make it into an academic exercise, the studying that they're doing, and rather than a. This is hard in a Catholic school where it's a class that you get grades for. So you're going to think of it like yet one more academic requirement. But it really, we need to be able to put something on it that, like, no, this is training to be missionary disciples in the middle of the world. And I think if we instill that sense of the adventure of the faith in them, like today's reading at the Mass was beautiful. It's, come follow me. Oh, I got to go bury my dad first. So, come follow me. And it's, you know, they make excuses. It's like, Jesus is like, I don't have any time for that. You know, it's like, you either follow me or you're not going to follow me. If we see the imperative of following it, actually, quite frankly, I really believe that the only way the church is going to really grow is when we start to be persecuted more. And you're starting to see that at the university level. I see my students regularly. I had a couple of students the other day like mocking me. Not my students, but they were just like, hey priest, you know, you having sex lately? I'm like, I don't know, how do I get, like, it's just like, you try to like, come back at them or something, but it's like they do things like that, and you're just like, you just put a smile on your face. But when my students saw that, and they're like, it's like, calm down. But what they saw is that their priest was being attacked, and they see that the faith is under attack in a lot of ways. I think we can see that, whether I don't care about the politics of people, we can see the way like Kavanaugh has been treated in the press and things because of his Catholic beliefs. I think it's that same kind of thing. When people start to see that I either choose to believe and I'm going to be persecuted, or I choose not to believe and be a persecutor, that's where you'll see the difference. The age of comfortable cultural Catholicism is dead, and I praise God for it. So, because that comfort does no service to the gospel. That's a little radical, a little provocative. All right. Good. Thank you all. God bless you. Can I give you a blessing? The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may Almighty God bless you, keep you, and protect you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have an awesome night.